Hello and Aloha Pa. God is glorious. The Baha'i greeting to all the people on the planet, to all the fellow human being, of which I'm just a small, minute part. Tonight I'm starting the third part of these videos. As I spoke before, we talked about the philosophy, then we talked the individual, and now we're talking about the human relations. One of the most important human relations is the marriage, where the man and woman come together. It's a very particular decisions as the most important one. Why? Is because at the age 20, 25, even 30, 35, depending on which country you are and what time you want to get married, but you're deciding for the rest of your life. It's almost an impossible decision to be successful. Very difficult. Because you have to be able to understand at age 20, what would you become at age 30, 35, 40, 45. No one can even picture you, your face. What would you look like? Some people in the criminologists in the police station, they take a picture and say, this is how it looks. But is there anybody to say that? What would your soul attributes, characters will become when you're 45? And what will happen to your spouse? You have to estimate both of them. This is the closest relationship. We don't have this relationship with our mothers and fathers, with our brothers and sisters, with our children's daughters and son. This one, you get to encounter the close of the four type. You actually become completely naked, physically and spiritually and psychologically with another person. You fuse into one. Yet, you're not that close to a person. You're much closer to your mother, but you don't sleep with your mother. You can't mother with your spouse, your sister, or your children. They are really close to you, genetically, but your spouse is not one of them. It's somebody who's coming from a different background, different upbringing, yet you're so close to him or her. This is what it is. So such a big task to become successful out of it. I don't know. I have figured and noticed mankind every 5 years really changes. When we're born and when we become 5 years, as if this 5 years old child is a new one and the baby is dead, metamorphosized into something else. Yet the baby is a part of the 5, and the 5 to 10, same thing, 10 to 15. When you know sex, and 15 to 20, probably when you get job, mature 25, you become married and then you become parents. Every 5 years, we kind of recycle and we become another one. So in marriage, we have to estimate what will steps will be. Will there be affinity? Will these two roads of characters will run parallel, or they will get separated? Because separation is very difficult, especially for the children. So at the age of 20, we'll have to decide for a man who's 35 and 40. So really, no politicians, no scientists, not even a magician, can figure that out. What exactly to do if me and the spouse are going to get along together or not. It's difficult. Why is that? Is because the laws that governs family, they're spiritual laws. please understand, with the spiritual, do not think of Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or this, and these are all just names. What I mean by spirituality is what common sense of spirituality is: loyalty, it's trust. These things are not political or sociological. I've spoken about this a lot of time. Nobody can constitute the laws of the family and be successful, because there's no really contract in a sense. It's a verbal contract. A person, to best of his ability, promises to be loyal. Can he? Does he know himself enough to say that? And the spirituality is not something I can train a person to be loyal. Really, I can't, because it's a decisions, you see. You can train a person to become a swimmer, a good talker, behave certain ways, attitudes, behavior, everything you can train. But if you want to train a person not to lie, it's total decisions of that person. He can become selfish and egotistic, and he lies. Doesn't matter whose father is and what training he had. Spirituality cannot be trained. It's a decision that the person has to stand on it. So, of course, such institution which has to be governed with this kind of laws, you could call it law, or you can call it a covenant, agreement. But this is a spiritual agreement. To create this in a two-dimensional society where it's only material and social values, it's failing. It's not working. So we have to create a system and a standard that's universal, that's global, acceptable everywhere on the planet. Some agreement of ethical and spiritual values that could be acceptable everywhere in the world. Because if we go with the standard of Islam and Christianity or Buddhism and Hinduism, they are rather national and continental standards. They're not exactly compatible to each other. And a spiritual woman in Islam that wants to carry hijabs and whatnot, or a Muslim, would not get along with a woman from a Christian family where they don't have hijabs. To him, that's not acceptable. So the standards are not compatible. So in Canada especially, where is really the melting pot, and all these nations of all kinds they come here, it's very difficult that you see fundamental Muslims actually marry fundamental Christians. Very hard. Love can be there, but it can tear off certain amount of these cultures, not completely. So this is why, to be honest with you, quite honestly, there is no other way except Baha'i faith as a new standard. If you know something else, let me know. And remember, this standard that you say cannot be your own common sense. Because if somebody comes up and says, hey, these things are so simple, I can legislate and bring it up. Sure. But can you make it practically acceptable to all around the world? No. Baha'i faith in the last couple hundred years has promulgated itself among all the cultures and all the nations and all the differences, and people of all kind of creeds have accepted it. As a trial and a test and laboratory of the world in 200 years, it tells us this can, engulf the world. So, but many people say that, all right, all what you're saying is that the essence of the Baha'i faith or any religion or a spiritual value is finally those attributes, that you have to be loyal, you have to be trustworthy, you have to be protective, you have to be honest, and other attributes. So I believe in all of those things. I don't need to be calling myself a Baha'i, or for that matter Christians or anything else. If me and my spouse, we believe in loyalty and trust and whatnot, we really don't need religion. Religion has caused a problem, and we don't need it. My question to these people is that God, which is the source, or at least used to be acceptable by all the people of the world, that it is the source of spirituality, is defined many ways. In order to specifically and practically talk about God, we all of a sudden talk Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. Because these religions are the embodiment of God. And when you look at them, they don't get along because they were from the past. So the method of Islam in showing loyalty is different from the same method of loyalty that a Christian and a Hindu does. In their religion, to be loyal or trustworthy or honest is just a word. It's ambiguous, it's general, subjective. It has to be demonstrated by certain actions. So, because as I said in the previous chapters, that the spiritual deed really brings up the spiritual attributes. So, if the loyalty according to a Muslim is that his wife has to be covered up, his hair, the hair of his wife has to be covered up and has a hijab. The same thing as the demonstrations of loyalty and chastity is not acceptable by a Christian man, or for that matter with a Hindu and Buddhist. So you see, loyalty is there. I understand both of you are talking about loyalty and trust, but the way you want to demonstrate it is different. And when it comes to action, you can see the pieces are not compatible. So simply to say that I believe in loyalty is not going to fix the problem, okay? Because it's demonstrated differently from everybody else, okay? Or one can say that, oh, it's a matter of giving. He wanted my body, the woman says. I let him to touch me. I was giving myself to him. Then I'm generous. Would you accept it? Many religions, they say no, I don't. So this is what I'm trying to say. When you talk about spiritual values, it has to be demonstrated by the behavior and attitude and understanding. And when it comes to understanding attitude, it's not acceptable. You know, the guy comes and says that, hey man, be generous. Give me a bottle of beer tonight, I don't have one. A Christian says, okay man, have one. Muslim says, what are you doing? You're not giving him, you're not being generous to him. Why? Because in Islam you can't drink, in Christianity it's okay, therefore there's no clashes of cultures. So, as I spoke and discussed, marriage is a decision that a man has to take at age 20, 25, younger stage of his life, something that has to last him the rest of his life. He has difficulty to even understand what he's going to be, much less to think about his spouse. And under this uncertainty, circumstances, they have to bring children. Very difficult. God in the Baha'i faith understand this very well. Okay. The difference of the Baha'i faith and other religions and no religions is usually the difference between the two cities. When you look at the big cities, the modern cities, there are great highways, traffic signs, great means of communication, traveling is all there. It can take a person easily to a destination without him getting lost or die in the trip or whatever. But in city, let's say, I don't know if bring a name. I'm not going to say the names because some people say that maybe not good. But imagine a city in the world that really does not have proper roads, traffic sign, policing, no car, no transportation, no telephone system. It's so backwards. And you want to compare the two cities. This is how you could compare Baha'i faith to other religions in the past. Or the people have no religion compared to the nature. Okay, you can go from here to Vancouver, from Toronto, through the highway, Trans-Canada Highway. We know where you go and how will you go. We can totally estimate what happens. Majority of the cases of the people who are traveling through this route, they will get to their destinations. And those who do not want to go to this highway, want to deny this highway, and they want to go on their bike or fly or whatever, we don't know what will happen to them. Those are the people who have no religion. It's very difficult then to take the promise of a person who's promising you that he'll be with you, but he's not even on the road. He's outside in the jungle and he wants to meet me in a certain place. How can I trust this man can get there? Even though he's telling the truth, but based on his understanding of the circumstances. But in reality, it's against the common intelligence that this fellow can get there. This is what Baha'i faith is. It has provided that the roads and circumstances that for you two can travel there and get there in the case of marriage. Because not only Baha'u'llah says that you have to grow in an environment, whereas you grow up from your childhood to the age of marriage, which is 15 or 20, now you have so much affinity, so much similarity, that you can understand each other's language, the language of understanding, not just the words. So when a Baha'i talks about loyalty, the other Baha'i says, he knows, because he has an example of it in the history of the Baha'i faith and in the words of Baha'u'llah. So they understand each other's dictionary when they talk about trust, when they talk about giving or donations or whatever. These words are no longer ambiguous and different. They know it. So you look at this agencies of marriage, they ask you millions of questions. I investigate these things, in the computer. Every damn thing that you can imagine, I do. I look into it, and I see that they ask thousands of questions, but they never ask any spiritual background questions, Like, what will happen if you come home and you see your spouse is having sex with another person? What is your opinion about adultery? They never ask that. They don't ask where you have come from. Is your father and mother, were they, had a free relationship? What religion they were practicing? They don't understand the past of these people who are going to get to marry is so important because of the foundation they're building. So Baha'u'llah says that, you want to marry, you want to create a relationship, and like any other one in the planet, even the relationship with your children lasts maybe 15, 20 years and they go. Your mother and father, you leave the house. Your brother and sister, after sometimes you may not see them even. They might go away. Your relationship is on the phone or once in a year maybe, because everybody has his own business. They're not meant to be together. The relationship of children and parents, they reach a maturity that has to go. Not marriage though. They are supposed to stay the rest of your life. But a person who does not have any physical or social affinity with you, it has to have therefore a spiritual affinity. If it doesn't have, it's not the same. Baha'u'llah says, it's like a building. You want to build a 70-story building, let's say every year is one floor. You want your marriage at 20 to last another 50 years, so it's a 50-story building, as opposed to your relationship with a contractor that it takes 3 days for him to do certain things, or with your boss at the job, which is a part-time relationship. This one is a permanent 24 hours relationship for 50 years. If you want to build such buildings, boy oh boy, you need foundations. You can't build this on a shallow ground with no foundation. The building will crumble down. You have to have that. You need foundations. And then he distinguishes his foundations, Baha'u'llah, for you. Oh God, in the relationship in Canada, let's say I'm seeing it, it's a beautiful relationship between husband and wife. For a year, for a two, it's like flowers, annual, perennials. They're like a big beautiful flower in a vase. Smells nice, fragrance, beauty, but after 2 years it's dead. Not good. 3 years is casual relationship. I can't be permanent. But marriage is like a pine tree. It doesn't have flower or anything, but it's strong. And it's not hanky-dory, as they say, but it needs a ground. It has roots. Canadian culture is only a couple hundred years. In India, there's 10,000 years behind it, and someplace in Europe. People growing up in those kind of cultures, the entire culture is holding your life together for you. The whole society. You don't do just the work to be a husband or wife. The street does. She can dress or he can dress against the society. Everything is kind of ordained in those ways. When then the people come together, there's not much of a problem. In Saudi Arabia, when you marry, you don't have any problem that your husband is going to be drinking in the bar. There is no bar. He's going to do adultery. That can happen. Your husband might be a thief. Very rarely. You don't have those problems. Your problem is that your husband might get another wife over you because Islam allows it. That's your problem. But your problem is not other things. So in those circumstances, they're not ideal, not anymore. But marriages can last, longer. In countries like Canada, because you're just starting a new humanity, so it doesn't work. Except that those old cultures are doomed to die. They're all getting dissolved, by the civilizations, new civilizations. They're all redefining everything. In Canada, though, or in Australia or US, Western countries, we're starting something new. It's not old, something new, but we have to define it. We have to understand it, what it is, so we can create a culture that can last. So Baha'u'llah says, you want to do this kind of a relationship, which is like a building like this. What do? It says a 20 years old man cannot decide for a 70 years old man, which is you, yourself, or your wife. You need help. So, first of all, it says, I am going to put you in a house. It's called Baha'i faith, in which there are parameters, there's kitchen, everything. Your house is not outside. Here you have privacy, you have comfort, the cold, heat, all of that is not going to bother you. Same type of a house, you have to build it as a virtual house and a spiritual house. The wall of this house are the rules and laws of Baha'u'llah. The people in this house, they know that they can't drink, they can't do drug, they can't cheat government, they can't tax evade, they can't cheat other people, they can't be cruel, they can't be violent, they can't marry 2 wives or 2 husbands. There are a lot of rules that by accepting Baha'i faith, you have bought that lot, that land from him. Now you have to constitute this. Okay? Within this house, which is your house right now, you're safe. Not completely, but that's one of the foundations of it, he says. One parameter of it. The second thing is that he says, okay, you're 20 years old and you're asking me, how can I make a decision that can last me 50 years? I said, well, it's stupid, you're 20. How can you decide for 50? Of your own and your wife. Baha'u'llah says you need to look where this 20 years old boy and girls is coming from. Baha'u'llah says he's coming from his mom and dad. Therefore, mom and dad, I am an extension of my mother and my father. If they were to be given life back, that would be me. So, in order to build a 50 years relationship, you're going to have to go at least 50 years back. I'm only 20. How could you go 50 years back? You have to look at me, into my father, into my mother, where I came from. They would have to be involved in it. They have to come and help me in my decision making. Not forcing me, but just helping me by guidance towards me. By mother, of course, my father, I mean real father and mother, not the guy who was just a sperm donor to make you. No. Those who, brought you up, even if they're not your real mother and father, physically, but they could be spiritually. They are your mother and father. Those who brought you up, they showed you the love, okay? They have to be a part of it. That's the second one, this is very important. The third thing Baha'u'llah suggests is that, okay, now, before a marriage, we have to have a trial, a practice. It just shouldn't happen, Baha'u'llah says. You can, he says, if you want to do it, but he's suggesting that a period called engagement. A couple, Baha'i couples, before they marry, they can go to a spiritual assembly and they actually engage themselves. And if they could not, their training was not enough to understand each other, they could go on and renew again their engagement for as many times as they want, till they understand each other, okay? So you see, first you have a spiritual Baha'i house, which is the laws of Baha'u'llah. Then the root, your mom and dad are behind this marriage. Then you have a trial time, which is engagement. These are the three factors that you have to look into it. The fourth one, that is as an interpreter of the Baha'u'llah's writing, elder of God I am, I say the laws of Baha'u'llah and the rule of the Baha'i faith are generally for all the people of the world. Specifically for one couple, it should draw a contract. Okay? If the couple come together, they say, okay, under the law of Baha'u'llah, we don't drink and do this and that and that and that, a lot of things. The laws of Baha'u'llah are certain rules and laws that Baha'u'llah interferes with a person. It tells them that, okay, if you do adultery, this is the things they have to do. But it doesn't say that if you are on the side, what do you have to do? He has. I'll give you one of the examples. He says if you're married and your marriage was based on the virginity of the couple, and you find out that they're not virgin, what do? He says marriage is gone because it was based on that. The contract is not. But if you forgive her or him, God will be very, very, very happy with you and have a great recompense for you. What is God saying? To forgive the adultery that your husband and wife made it? Yes, he says. See, this is his suggestions, but he's not forcing it. So it's up to you. If you want to dissolve it, it's dissolved. Now, all of a sudden, therefore, this house, which is basically based on the Canadian law or Ontario law, Ontario Building Code is being made, but is specified for me. I've done it. Baha'i marriage is the same way. You can follow the code and the laws of Baha'u'llah generally, but specifically you can bring it in a contract and say to your spouse that, okay, there are things that I think is very important for me. If during marriage, if you end up becoming a smoker, you're not a smoker right now, but if you end up being a smoker, I'm going to ask you to do this and that, or you're going to ask me to do this and that. If I find you to do adultery, okay, by the law of Baha'u'llah, you can pay the fine, but I am not also allowed not to live with you. But I'm going to say that if you do this, I'm going to do this and that and that. So there has to be a contract made. This contract cannot go outside of the Baha'i faith. For example, you can't say, if I saw you on adultery, I'm going to cut your nuts. Well, that's not acceptable by the Canadian law, or I don't know, the law of any country. In Saudi Arabia also they don't do that. Or against the law of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah does not accept that either. So you have to make a contract of further extensions of the laws of Baha'u'llah and the laws of the country you're in, preferably under Baha'i government. So the Baha'i government and the laws of Baha'u'llah are not against your contract. Your contract is further elucidations of those things specifically drawn for you and your spouse. Why? Because you want to raise these children for 20 years and you want to be making sure that they will have certain tranquility and spirituality and circumstances under which they can grow. So, I'm saying the laws of Baha'u'llah has to become a specific contract in which mom and dad have to help the two couples. And don't be offended by this saying that, oh, if you love somebody, my son says, if you love somebody, you have a full trust. And I told him, no, son, you should not even trust yourself, never mind your spouse. How could you trust yourself to know what will you be at age 35? Who knows? At age 50, who knows? Okay. And then you do love your children because you don't know even who you would become. You create this contract to make your spouse to watch for the children. If you become bad so he can protect the children against you, or she becomes bad, you could. It's not a bad thing. It's not a matter of contract that I don't love you. You love people, but you cannot trust them. You cannot even trust yourself. You shouldn't. How do you know what would you become? Trusting means to know the knowledge of unseen. I'm not a magician. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not a prophet to know what I would become. Who knows? Baha'u'llah says no one should estimate his spiritual destiny, even his own, he says. Because in 1 second you might change from hell to heaven, he says. Before you die, in 1 second before you die, you might change hell to heaven. If there's that much of oscillations, therefore we should not trust this. But we have to stand by it and say that, okay, we are like a driver. I'm not going to trust this road is going to go up, down, left, right, or straight, or slippery, or this or that. But I have learned the driving that when the circumstances comes in, I am there to turn the wheel when it's necessary. So majority of the people, when you look at them, they're not even capable of marriage. They're born to be a casual people. They're barflies. They do not have the history of consistency over anything. How could they show consistency over 50 years? Even though their love is as big as Romeo and they would definitely die unquestionably for their beloved, yet they will show incapacity if they have to live 50 years with a person because they don't know what they will become. You have to learn the skills. Baha'u'llah says you cannot predict it, but you have to have the skills. As by bringing you up as a Baha'i, you become a driver of what? Of communications, of cooperations, collaborations, of being with somebody. A license of unity you have to have. A license of getting along with somebody. This you have to have under the Baha'i education. Then you have to have a contract made and cut specifically for you and her to live in that. In that contract, your mom and dad have to be a part of it to help you to do it. Okay? And even though all of these things is measured, he says before that even, you have to take a period to practice and do background check and a lot of things during the engagement to see if you can actually live together. So, this was just a little philosophy of marriage. That how important, how difficult it might be. I just draw some outlines. I'm going to be talking right now about those things that Baha'u'llah talks about. The laws of Baha'u'llah, which creates a contract of marriage, the effect of the mother and father, and the marriage during the marriage, where husband and wife, they have to test each other over a lot of subjects to see if they have the consistency, the capacity. Willingness is there, I know at that time. But in an experiment, is that going to be? Sometimes the marriage could be a point that one could draw and say that, okay, we can love each other and marry, but we can't have children. That might be too much. In the old marriage, like in Iran, man was the boss of the woman. Even in India was like that. China was like that. In the old world, probably Europe was like that too. Marriage is like a relationship, like a rope. It's attached between the two people. And now you have to go through these woods and jungles with a lot of trees. If she comes behind you and you're going straight as a man, like this, you could go through the jungles and navigate and get yourself there. But today, men and women are equal. They're both equal. Husband, wife, they're equal. Now you want to have a rope in between them and tell them, okay, go through the wood, go through the jungle. What would happen? They can never pass. Nowhere. The trees are going to be in between. Because one has to follow the next one. But that's not the marriage today. But I still have to go through the woods. What do? This is where the contract comes. The skills has to come. How sometimes man has to be behind the husband, husband has to be behind the wife to work it out. This is a new type of marriage. Democracy does not work here. Democracy is only a common road. For those who pay the road outside of this house, they could be democracy. Because majority of the people would rule. But between husband and wife, you can apply the democracy. Which one to get the vote? Children getting involved are only 5 and 6 years old. They can't vote. What do? Husband has to listen to wife, wife has to listen. So what's the mechanism of solving the problem? That's a big thing that I'm going to be talking about too. So we'll leave it here for now. Time is actually 12:45. This is relation number 1, as I said, which man has with another person. In this case, there's husband and wife, man and woman. But there are other type of relationship of the same. We have to talk about it too. But right now, I'm just going to be talking about marriage next time and how we can draw a good marriage, good contract, something, a house, something, a mechanism in which that can survive. The countries such as Canada where there is none of these things in there. So we have to take a lot of provisional measures to create a Baha'i government. There, the marriage will become simpler and easier when the things get extended to that point. But until then, we have to be very careful. May Baha'u'llah be with you and the spirit of the truth till the next time.